Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be talking about happiness in this chapter. It's taken us a long time to get to the chapter that finally will cover the first word in the title of this class. But we're here. All right, we're going to talk about happiness. Let's go ahead and get started with some of the benefits of happiness. Like, why are we devoting an entire class to happiness and positivity? What is the benefit? Well, first off, there's this tendency for people who feel good to do good and to live good. I hate the grammar on this. I get that it's symmetrical, but the grammar is killing me. But when you are feeling positively, you tend to behave in more positive ways. And those are positive ways that benefit other people. So you do good acts more commonly. You're more likely to do favors. You're more likely to help someone. And then also, you're more likely to engage in things that would be beneficial for you, right? You eat better, you exercise more, you engage with friends more often when you're feeling good. And so, those are things that then can pay dividends in, you know, sort of perpetuating happiness because being around other people, eating well, exercising tend to make you feel better. And so then you tend to be more prone to happiness. So it's a big cycle, right? So, people who tend to score happier on happiness scales tend to live longer than other people do. They tend to be more productive than other people are at work and in their off time. So, happy people tend to do more, right, of whatever it is that they do. They tend to be more tolerant towards other people, less judgmental, less racist, less sexist, less critical. They just are more tolerant of variety. They tend to be more creative. They tend to think of solutions that might be novel. They tend to think outside the box. They can express their creativity in art or music or dance or whatever strategy they're good at. So creativity is boosted. Thinking in general is boosted. People who tend to be happier tend to make better decisions in a shorter time frame. Because fast isn't always the solution to good decision making, is it? Just being able to make a decision quickly doesn't mean that you've made good decisions. But people who are happy tend to find it easier to come to good solutions. So that might be that it's quicker. It might be that they felt like they had to expend less cognitive effort. It could just be that they are satisfied with the decisions that they make, regardless of how much time or effort it takes to reach those decisions. People who are happy are more likely to select challenging goals, and then once they're pursuing that challenging goal, they're more likely to persist. And when in lab research, when they're given a challenging task to engage in, happy people tend to stick with it longer and tend to perform better than people who score lower on a happiness scale in a lab setting. And then they tend to show more empathy towards other people. People who are feeling good inside themselves tend to assume better things about the people around them. They are more empathetic to their own close friends. They tend to have better marriages than people who are not as happy. So that's a long list of benefits of happiness. So still haven't defined what happiness is, so let's just keep going. Okay, what if we say happiness is a positive emotion? That seems like a safe thing to say, right? Happiness is a positive emotion. All right. Um, in this study, they had people, they were wearing it, it's such a long time ago, they actually were wearing pagers that would beep them and remind them to note how they were feeling at the moment. And so there were multiple times across the day where they recorded their happiness and or their positive and their negative emotions. And so if you look at that black line across the middle, that is zero. That's baseline. So anything above zero is going to be a positive emotion, and anything that's below zero is going to be a negative emotion. And so you see that the positive emotions start out below the line and they're not experiencing much positive emotion. They have more negative than positive emotion at that when they first wake up at 0 hours since rising. But then as they go along, within an hour of rising, people are on the positive side. They're starting to experience a positive emotion, and that tends to continue climbing until they've been awake for on average 7 hours, and then it starts to decline. And by the way, I'd like to point out that this doesn't matter what time the person woke up. It just matters how long it's been since they woke up. So if you're an early riser or a late riser, this doesn't really matter. It just matters for how long since you woke up. So within about 7 hours of rising, we have reached our peak of positive emotion and it has started to drop. Meanwhile, the negative emotion has stayed below that baseline line most of the day. It has been being overwhelmed or overtaken by the positive emotion for most of the day. But as we start to see the decline in happiness in hours 9 and 10 since waking, you start to see the happiness, I mean, sorry, the negative emotions start to peak out over that baseline. So by the hour 12, we certainly are seeing more negative emotion than positive emotion. By having been awake by 12 hours, half the day you've been awake, positive emotion is waning and negative emotion is going to start predominating. And so by the time a person's ready to go to bed, they have more negative emotion than positive emotion. And that might be why they go to bed. I'm not feeling great. I need some sleep. I'm feeling kind of cranky, right? And so I need to go to sleep. So I think the big pattern I want you to get from this chart is that the positive emotion tends to predominate through most of the day for most people on average. There's sort of that I've been awake for 12 hours when it starts to make that shift. And that's when most people are like, I need to get home, or if I'm already home, maybe it's time to start getting ready for bed, those kinds of things. So this is just sort of generic positive emotion versus generic negative emotion. We're not really defining it in this slide. All right. Let's explore this concept of feeling good, doing good, right? I feel good, so I do good. Some people have wondered whether there's a paradox of happiness, that if we spend our time trying to seek happiness in ourselves, if our goal is for us to feel positive, the positive emotion that we would call happiness, are we actually causing ourselves to be less happy than we could have been? Right? Are we actually experiencing less happiness as a result of our pursuit of happiness? Is that the paradox of happiness? What some people have argued is that rather than pursuing your own happiness, if you want to truly be happy, if you truly want to have those positive emotions, the best route to that is to do good works for other people, to contribute your time, to contribute your skills, to help somebody else, to mentor somebody else, to do something for someone else. And that'll make you in return feel better. You will actually experience positive emotion as a result of that, and that it will be more reliable that you'll experience positive emotion from that than if your goal is to find happiness for yourself. So this is if in your reading, if you come across this concept of is there a paradox of happiness, the idea is the harder you chase it, perhaps the harder it is to actually capture, and that the best way to get it is to stop trying to get it for yourself, but try to do good works for others. Another issue in the feel good, do good idea, is it possible that there's an illusory correlation between this notion that people who feel good tend to be people who do good, right? Is there a true like sort of causal relationship where feeling good makes you do good works? Or is it an illusory correlation where it looks like those two things go together, but they really don't? So when we break it down, we know that selflessness is a socially desirable characteristic. We tend to admire and hold up as good examples people who are selfless, who do things for other people, maybe even to their own detriment, right? They spend their own money doing it, or they spend their own time doing it, or maybe they could get hurt doing it, or something like that. And we really hold them up as like, that's a great example of a selfless person. Right. So that's a socially desirable trait. And happiness is a socially desirable trait. Like I said on the first graphic, there's all this good stuff that goes along with being happy. And so a lot of us think that if we were happy, we'd have all those other things. And so that's a socially desirable condition, right? To be happy. So both of those are socially desirable traits. And so we might be sort of labeling people that we like as having both of those traits when maybe those are just existing together. They aren't, it's not like being happy makes you selfless or being selfless makes you happy. Maybe it's just that some people, maybe people we like, we tend to perceive them as both selfless and happy. And it maybe is not causally related at all. So, kind of an interesting concept to think about, right? Um, they find in research that there is a positive correlation for male respondents between doing good works and then feeling good. There's a positive correlation for males. And so it doesn't look like it's an illusory correlation. It's not just in our minds when we talk about males. It seems to be true that males who are selfless tend to also be happy, or those who are more selfless tend to be happier, and those who are less selfless tend to be less happy, kind of thing. According to Feingold's research, though, that's not true for females. There's no correlation between doing selfless acts and then being happy. There's no relationship, causal or correlational at all for females. And so Feingold argues maybe part of the reason why um, this pattern isn't always solidly found in the research might be because if you're looking at males or you're looking at females, you get different kinds of patterns. So when we talk about feeling better, maybe for males it would be good advice to say, hey, why don't you volunteer? Why don't you take a training course in first aid so that you could be helpful if that happened, or something like that. That might be really good advice for males and might be less helpful for females. So interesting thing to consider, right? All right, we still haven't officially defined what happiness is, but let's keep going. All right, let's take a scale. Let's take a test. If you don't know what a concept really is, the best thing to do is to take a test about it, right? The orientations to happiness scale, your responses will be provided on a Likert type scale from 1, which means that you strongly disagree, to 7, which means you strongly agree. There is a neutral on this scale, so if you want to, you can pick the 4. I would just recommend, since you're taking this in the privacy of your own home, try and stay off the 4. Try and lean one way or the other because that'll give you more clear-cut answers for your, when you sum it up. So try to stay off the 4 if you can. All right, here's number 1. Regardless of what I'm doing, time passes very quickly. Regardless of what I'm doing, time passes very quickly. 2, my life serves a higher purpose. I forgot to mention, if you need to go get a piece of paper and a pencil, you can always pause me, but hopefully you know that already. So hopefully you're playing along, because things are always more fun if you play along. You can pause me now and go get a paper and pencil if you've decided, that's right, I want to play along. All right, let's get back to it. 3, life is too short to postpone the pleasures it can provide. 4, I seek out situations that challenge my skills and abilities. 5, in choosing what to do, I always take into account whether it will benefit other people. 6, whether at work or play, I am usually in a zone and not conscious of myself. 7, I am always very absorbed in what I do. 8, I go out of my way to feel euphoric. 9, in choosing what to do, I always take into account whether I can lose myself in it. 10, I am rarely distracted by what is going on around me. 11, I have a responsibility to make the world a better place. 12, my life has a lasting meaning. 13, in choosing what to do, I always take into account whether it will be pleasurable. 14, what I do matters to society. 15, I agree with this statement. Life is short. Eat dessert first. 16, I love to do things that excite my senses. 17, I have spent a lot of time thinking about what life means and how I fit into its big picture. 17, for me, the good life is the pleasurable life. All right, so that is your happiness scale or your orientation to happiness scale. You got to love that it just has 18 items, but that is a sign that it was created using a statistical method rather than just sort of guessing about what would be good questions. So it's actually a good sign. All right, so that was our orientations to happiness scale. If you needed to stop me and go back and really think about it some more, please do that now because I'm about to ruin it for you. So this scale actually breaks down into subscales. First off is scale 1, and that would be your pleasure scale. And to get your score on that, you're going to sum up your ratings for items 3, 8, 13, 15, 16, and 18. So go ahead and sum those up. When we're in class, I always tell people to circle those numbers, so that's why there's a circle around this. So pleasure scale. Then we have scale 2, which is an engagement scale. I always tell people to draw a square around the numbers. And you're going to get your score on this scale by summing up your ratings from items 1, 4, 6, 7, 9, and 10. And then the final scale is the meaning scale. And for this one, you're going to sum up your ratings for items 2, 5, 11, 12, 14, and 17. So 3 separate scales, the pleasure scale, the engagement scale, and the meaning scale. So go ahead and pause me, do your math, come on back. All right, hopefully you're back. So the pleasure scale is oftentimes referred to as the hedonism scale. Hedonism was a old way of thinking that, life is really about the pursuit of pleasure. And back then, you might have remembered, you might have heard about this. There was hedonists who would gorge themselves at big banquets. Then they would tickle the back of their throats with a feather, throw everything up, and so that they could gorge themselves again, so they could enjoy the pleasure of eating. So, scale 2, engagement, is really focused on whether you're being true to yourself and trying to develop your best skills and abilities that are the perfect match between it, being engaged in those tasks and challenging your skill set. And then it also includes those questions that have to do with serving others. And then scale 3 is the meaning scale. And this really would line up nicely with Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow. And this is where the challenges of the tasks are matching your abilities really so well that you get lost in what you're doing. So all of these are positively correlated with each other. So if we're going to define happiness, we probably are not going to pick just one thing and say the pursuit of pleasure is what we mean by happiness, or being engaged in life and really challenging ourselves is what we mean by happiness. That by itself is probably not a full picture of what happiness is. And finding meaning in life is probably not a full picture of happiness. All of these are positively correlated with each other, which implies that happiness probably is some kind of composite of pleasure, engagement, and meaning in life. Okay, so a high score on all 3 of these scales would be characterized by the theorists as meaning that you're engaging in a full life. You have all the components of at least what they perceive to be happiness. If you have a low score on all 3, they would say that you are experiencing an empty life, and that would not be correlated with happiness. That would be an empty life would be the opposite of having happiness in your life. So you don't need all 3 to be happy, but you almost are assured of happiness if you have all 3. If you have engagement, you're probably going to have happiness. If you have meaning, you're probably going to have happiness. But if you are lacking pleasure, engagement, meaning, you probably are not experiencing happiness. All right, let's stop here and we'll come back in the next video and we'll talk about whether money buys happiness.